So, guys, I want to talk about the recent Tony Khan controversy. And what happened was that he announced that there's going to be a match on AEW Maximum Carnage Collision. And it's going to be the Learning Tree and the Death Riders versus, Powerhouse Hobbs and Team FTR and a few other people. Like, it's going to be an 8 versus 8 16-man match. And there's been a lot of criticisms about that because, first of all, it's bad continuity because the Death Riders say that they don't like what AEW has been. There's a lot of fake people. There's a lot of like veterans and other people kind of taking over the company. So why is Chris Jericho and Mock teaming up? Why is the Death Riders teaming up with Moxley? That makes no sense. And then the other part of it is that not a lot of people like 16-man matches because it becomes a large clusterfuck. Like a few years ago, I believe they had Luchasaurus and a few other people be in and the Young Bucks being 6-man or 16-man or 8-man tag teams. And what would happen is Luchasaurus and other people would do a stunt and then their opponents would catch them. And it looked up and it was choreographed in a way where it's almost like the opponents are making sure where like two enemies are, where the enemy and the heel and the babyface, it's like the babyface is being caught by the heel is looking out for the babyface. Like it's just not a good type of like dynamic and anything like that really. So those are always big clusterfuck matches. And I think like really personally, there's two reasons why Tony is doing this. That number one, when you have back-to-back shows, you need to feature everybody. It makes a lot of sense. If you're going to have the Young Bucks on Dynamite and you're going to be in the same arena, why not feature them on Collision the day after that? That's why they're doing that. It's just to feature your big and best stars on both shows, really. And then also, there's a lot of pressure on them to make sure Collision does very well, so it does not become another Rampage. And then the other part of it is really that they want to put Powerhouse Hobbs and a couple of those wrestlers in bigger and better spots. It looks good when you have Powerhouse Hobbs wrestle Moxley. And even though I want him to win, a lot of people want him to win, it's very wishful thinking. Like the odds are really against Hobbs. And, but it would look good if he was doing double team moves with Adam Copeland. It looks good if he's hitting like John Moxley. It looks good if he's hitting Chris Jericho. This could set up Hobbs versus Chris Jericho at like an ROH pay-per-view. It does a lot to elevate Hobbs really. And it also does a lot to say, okay, if you go to the show, you see 16 wrestlers, but a majority of them, Hobbs, Moxley, FTR, Adam Copeland, Chris Jericho are people that, the fans that fans do want to see, not Wheeler Yuta or a few other people in the Death Riders, so I understand where Tony's coming from. It just looks good to make it star-studded, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, and like I've mentioned before, it would be the exact same thing as if the day before like WrestleMania 2000 you had the Dudleys, the Hardys, and Edge and Christian, like those 6 people, wrestle like the Corporation and Vince McMahon, Rock and Austin, and a lot of other people who at that time were against each other. It does not make any sense. And I think a lot of people are calling Tony Khan out for that because, it goes down to what Cornette said. It's lazy booking because you're not thinking about, what makes sense really. And I think that a lot of people are fed up with Tony and expect him to be at a higher standard because with professional wrestling, it is a form of entertainment. And like with any good movie, you have to really, really focus on sense and continuity because otherwise it does two things. It's just like, people want logic and people do care about logic and people do care about making sure things are either easy to follow or they are being followed. So, and it does hurt the quality really. You got to make sure things do make sense really, and people are going to hold you accountable for that. And I think with Tony, like I've said before, and a lot of people will say, is that he doesn't hold himself accountable for logic and continuity. He really thinks that matches are the only things that matter to professional wrestling, and it is story, it is motivation, it is building a new generation. It's all those things, really. But if he really does not care about having that standard, a lot of people are going to call him out for that, because when AEW started, that was really the mission point. The mission point of AEW was saying that WWE has really dropped their standard, and AEW is really, going to be that place where they pick up the ball. And I think that as WWE hasn't got their standard a lot better, now it has to be like an organization that is profitable, that has a lot of high standards, that's always going to rival WWE, and be a place for like wrestlers to work, or fans that say, you know what, I want a television show that focuses more on wrestling. I want a television show that doesn't have all the WWE, kind of like, silly and campy bullcrap, or I want to focus on a show that's a little bit more TV 14, or I want to focus on a show where you see a lot of underdog wrestlers that can be something someday. AEW has those things, but they don't really care about their quality too much. And it's like what a lot of people say, that they are so much of a sword and a stone. They have so many things that could be a gold mine to them right now, and they're not really doing anything with that. They have a lot of blown opportunities, and there's still opportunities that they're blowing, really, like the women's division, focusing way too much on Mariah May and Toni Storm. You have like what I've said about Ring of Honor, where you have Chris Jericho running it, when, what could really help is that you make Powerhouse Hobbs take the title off of Jericho. You do something like you have Chris Jericho versus Dustin Rhodes, an old man talking about him being a selfish person versus an old man that's like, you know what, you've gone too far, Chris Jericho. I want to be the first. I want to have a championship. I want to take things over. I want to do things the right way. I want to teach the next generation the right way. There's a story in that. Or you do something where you have Powerhouse Hobbs do one of two things. Yeah, excuse me. You have Powerhouse Hobbs be fed up with Chris Jericho and his bullshit, so he takes over Ring of Honor, and you make him the Ring of Honor champion by like Supercard of Honor, or at Supercard of Honor, takes off the title, and you have a new young star in Ring of Honor, and eventually he goes after the AEW championship. Or you do something like you have Powerhouse Hobbs go with the Moxley mission, and then he dominates, the learning tree, and then he dominates Edge and FTR, then he joins the Moxley faction, and then he takes out Wheeler Yuta, and he becomes that member, and he's kind of like, you know what, hey, everybody, I'm with Moxley's mission. He proved something to me. Now I want to prove something to everybody else, really, and all that great stuff. So that would be something as well, really. Or you can do something where, all these wrestlers are doing this, and then you have like Hobbs attack a bunch of people, or you have the Hurt Syndicate do an invasion, and then you kind of set up as a gang warfare. It's the Moxley faction versus Rated FTR versus the Hurt Syndicate, and it's like about who can take over AEW. That'll be a clusterfuck. So definitely with all this attention, really, they can really say, you know what, people are talking about it, people are criticizing it, what directions can we go in with this? But I really think the smartest thing you can do is two things this week. You can make Hobbs the AEW champion and really show to the fans that the Death Rider storyline is dead, really, and have Moxley have his revelation and all that. Or you can do something where Hobbs loses, and you either do it fair and square with a bunch of cheating, and then Hobbs is like, I'm going to join the Death Riders, and I'm going to take out Chris Jericho, and the Moxley faction is going to help me actually, take on Big Bill and Brian Keith. So when it is Jericho versus Powerhouse Hobbs, you do a squash match, he becomes the ROH champion, and then eventually Hobbs gets power hungry, and then he goes and he takes the title away from Moxley one more time, really. Like, he does a bunch of Benedict Arnold type of stuff, really. That would be like the strongest direction, really. And that's where they should kind of go in. But I think that more than likely you're going to see a storyline that doesn't have a lot of continuity. And then on top of that, and the other really important thing is what we've seen a lot of in AEW, like 8-man tags, 12-man tags, and 16-man tags. And a lot of people don't like that. And the big reason why people don't like that is, first of all, those are very bad matches. I always say that I hate those matches with a passion because I don't like when you have wrestlers that are sticking their hands out and they have to tag or tap a wrestler from another team to get into the ring. If you have like 4 tag teams and it's like a 8-man match, really, it should be one person from each tag team. So it's like 4 people in a ring at the same time, really. Or you're going to do 6 versus 6 and it's like 3 tag teams. You have like 3 people in at one time, really. That's how you do that. You don't do something retarded. Like, okay, well, you know what, Edge and Jeff Hardy are in the ring, so one of the Dudleys has to tap them and get into the ring. No, it should be like it should be a 3-way in the ring, and then it should be, it should always be a 3-way in the ring, and people should tap in their partner. That makes a lot of sense, really. But how they do that in AEW and other places, or even in TNA, where you have to tap your opponent to get into the ring in these multi-man matches, it looks really stupid. And it looks really, really stupid. And then the other thing is it's a very bad visual. Because, if you're focusing on 16 people, that's way, way too much carnage. That's way, way too much things to focus on. You can't really have good camera angles with that. It's easy for people to not be invested, because how can you be invested in 16 people? It's way too much. Or you look at something like the Royal Rumble, where the way that the Rumble works is that you have one person come down at a time, really. And then there's a minute where there's like a 10-second counter. There's somebody coming down and then they get their pop, really. So in a way with the Rumble, you do enough of acknowledging everybody. And then when they're in together, really, it feels like there's an emphasis on all of them. But when you're doing a 16-man match, really, it becomes a clusterfuck. And then also with a 16-man match, it goes between like maybe a half an hour maximum, 16 minutes at the minimum. So it's just so much action and carnage and just bodies being thrown around, really. You don't become invested in all that. And I think the last thing that I'll say is AEW World's End, because they failed so horribly with the Fatal 4-Way. They had, especially when I was in the crowd, really, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to Revolution, is because they did such a horrible understander job, because they had people disappear in the audience. You didn't do what you did with Anarchy in the Arena, doing the multiple camera thing. I can imagine people at home, some of them are like, okay, what's going on with Jay White and Marina Shafir? What's going on with Jay White and Adam Page and a couple of other things? You're not seeing a bulk of that. You're seeing like what happens in the ring, the camera's on that, everybody else disappears for a while. So it's just not good. They don't film their multi-man matches that well anymore, except when it comes to Anarchy in the Arena. But they really have to do all that stuff, really. They really have to just raise their standard if you're going to do multi-man matches. So I really appreciate the criticism Tony is getting. And I really think that what he has to do is he has to think about, the results this week. I really think it's going to be Powerhouse Hobbs losing to Moxley. It's wishful thinking, but Hobbs should win this one and put AEW in a new direction. If he loses, then you have to do something bigger and better with Hobbs. And I think joining the Moxley faction is the thing that you do. Get rid of Wheeler Yuta. Actually fire him because he doesn't look like a legitimate wrestler. Or you may have Yuta go away and then, you have him come back with Bryan Danielson, and then also you show videos of Bryan Danielson training him and forgiving him and making him do things the right way. And, he almost becomes that underdog type of wrestler. And, he gains muscle mass. He looks like a legitimate wrestler. That could be the thing. Then you have Hobbs being the entitled. He's part of the Death Riders, but then he joins like then he kind of gets a little too entitled for his own thing, really. There's a lot that they can do, really. There's a lot of creative directions that they should think about, or options and a bunch of good creative risks, really. But a bad creative risk is doing what we see, the same old shit, which is, oh, we're going to have a multi-man match, really. And maybe if we have some people that do a great job within that match, Dave Meltzer is going to, give it 5 stars. We're going to have Will Ospreay in that. So it automatically becomes like a 5-star banger or whatever, really. But definitely multi-man matches are lazy booking. It's definitely good that a lot of people are voicing their opinion and they want Tony to have a higher standard. You have to have stories that are compelling and make sense. You have to do things with titles to actually make the titles mean something. You have to always consistently build the next generation of superstars because, again, why do people like WWE now? Is because of NXT. NXT says that there's Trick Williams. Wow, Trick Williams getting this amazing response. He's being booked well. He's being taught what to do and not to do. So when you see Trick Williams at WrestleMania in a couple of years, you automatically are going to pop for him. But when you see somebody like Daniel Garcia doing the dick dancing, you know that he's never going to be a main event guy in AEW. When you see a person like Kyle Fletcher, and one of the reasons why he didn't win the Continental Classic was because a lot of the people in the Continental Classic and in AEW during the World's End pay-per-view, a lot of the title holders were appearing on the Japanese show, so they didn't want to drop titles. So you take a person like Kyle Fletcher and you kind of show, okay, he can't win a major tournament. He can't like go to the next level, really. He can't be a main eventer. There's an opportunity to make him a main eventer. Or you do something with Powerhouse Hobbs where he may lose twice this week. He may lose to Moxley. He may get the pinfall against Moxley again, or he may get the pinfall against Chris Jericho, or you feature him in this match and he's kind of doing like sentons or other things over the ropes, and then he's actually damaging himself again. Or you may do the Wardlow thing where, okay, he has championship match and then he's gonna disappear for maybe over a year or whatever. Really, like there's a lot of like also directions that they can kind of take from this and do it wrong. And then people are gonna be like, okay, why should I invest in Hobbs or Fletcher or any other wrestler in that roster right now that could be your next generation? And I really think that there's only 2 people right now. It's Fletcher and Hobbs. They're the only 2 people on that roster that's really your next generation. Everybody else doesn't have it really. Sammy could have it, but he has to work at it. Jack Perry could have it. He has to work at it. And the Von Erichs are a long shot, really, but you don't really have that next generation, really, of young talent or people who have not gotten over in WWE actually making something out of themselves. So, there's a lot of things that Tony has to think about to make this work, and I really hope he does that. The easiest thing to do is to be like, okay, we're going to stick to our plan, which is we're going to wait until Darby Allin comes back from Mount Everest, and then that's when Moxley's going to drop the title. And then a bunch of people are going to be like, okay, this storyline is going to be drawn out until July. You already have 10,000 people at a 50,000 seat arena, so you're at 20% capacity, and maybe you're going to make it to 20,000 people when it should be at 50,000 people. Oh, well, you just downsized from a 50,000 seat arena in Australia to maybe a 20,000 seat arena. Oh, well, you know what? You can't do shockwaves because people don't want it. You can't, you don't have Rampage anymore. Oh, well, Tony Khan is going around after shows doing selfies with people because he wants people to stay to the end for Ring of Honor and other things. Oh, well, your Ring of Honor show drew 1,300 people at the Hammerstein Ballroom when I think the maximum capacity at the Hammerstein is like 3,000 people. And you've had Ring of Honor shows that have gone from I think 8,000 to 3,000 to 1,300 people and all that stuff. Like there's a lot of signs that say, you know what, people want good stories, people want good writing, people want continuity, people feel like when you don't have those things, their intelligence is being insulted, and people can nitpick the things that don't make sense, and people say, okay, these multi-man matches are just a way not to focus on stories. It's a way to focus on these Dave Meltzer types of matches. These are all just things that Tony has to recognize and say, okay, well, I guess as the saying goes, people's chase of changes. People want good stories, and they want, like, stars to be built nowadays. They don't want these Dave Meltzer type of matches. You can have that. You can have those really great matches with really great stories. It has to marry together, and that's going to make AEW successful. That's going to make or break AEW. So I think this has to be a lesson for Tony about, what the fans really want and what the fans expect, really. And you can go down this cycle of doing what you want to do and not pivoting when you should be pivoting, and really taking some creative risks to get back on track, really. Or you can do something like keep going the direction that you're going, and then people are going to say that you're just like Vince. You just don't care about quality, and you just care about having your types of matches, really, and you're doing it for an audience of one. And that's what Vince did, and that's why they're not successful. Then when GCW or TNA actually, or Vince trying to start a new company, when those things come up, really, then you're going to take the place of TNA Wrestling or another organization that had something and went downhill, really. So this is really this should be like an eye opener for Tony to really fix a lot of problems.